Welcome to Aiken Business Matters, and we are just pleased as we could be today to have with us Kathy Huff Cunningham. She is the owner and publisher of Bella Magazine, and I know you've seen Bella Magazine around Aiken, and we want you to get to know a little bit more about Bella Magazine and a lot more about Kathy. Kathy, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Kathy, you and I have known each other for a number of years, and we share a lot of things in common, having grown up in Aiken. So I just wanted to say that and just to be transparent to our audience that, as I said to a guest I had the week, that I always feel funny asking questions that I know the answer to, and I know they know I know the answer to it. But we're going to do that anyway so people get to know Kathy a little bit better. Kathy, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and growing up here in Aiken.
Well, I moved here in second grade. My stepfather had got a job at the Savannah River site, then the Savannah River plant. And we moved here at the end of my second grade year. And it was culture shock because we moved from Nebraska.
Wow.
A little farming town in Nebraska where my father and my uncle had been the small town newspaper editors of a weekly newspaper, so I grew up with printer's ink in my blood.
There you go.
But moving here was wonderful. We loved Aiken, took to it right away, and every summer was spent entertaining all of our relatives from the Midwest, or we went back there, and either way, they knew all about Aiken.
Tell me one of the things that stands out to you in growing up in Aiken that really, we all have memories of things that we think back. What was the thing that you think about most about growing up in Aiken that was most unique for you?
Well, I think it's because I formed such lasting friendships. Okay. From second grade on, even if I wasn't in the same class or the same school as those kids, we all came together in high school. And I still have deep friendships from that time period. One of the boys in my second grade class comes back occasionally to see his mother, and there's a whole group of us that gets together. Mm-hmm. So even though we didn't necessarily keep in touch after we graduated, somehow these things come together, and people just gravitate toward the special relationships that they've had.
You know what, that is so true. And a lot of class reunions take place, and then reestablishment of relationships and things like that. Now, you grew up in Aiken and you went to school here. Where did you go to college?
Went to Florida State University.
Okay. In
Tallahassee. I graduated with a degree in history and came back to Aiken and taught for 1 year. Taught American history at Aiken High School.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. So you went back to your roots then.
Yes, and I had study hall with all my old teachers. And
wow.
If that wasn't a trip, I don't know what was.
Well, when you first went back, who were some of the teachers that you remember that were still there?
Mrs. Bobo, Miss Barlow, Mrs. Owen, Mrs. Hilborn. Mr. Willis was still the principal. Wow. So it was an interesting time.
Well, you just listed all the teachers that were there for so many years, and there are so many people in Aiken that could look back and say, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Right.
And what a wonderful principal Mr. Willis was. Mm-hmm. He was a great man. Kathy, what did you do after you graduated after graduation and after you came back to Aiken? You said you taught for a year. What did you do then?
I got married that summer to a man that I'd met here in Aiken, and we dated that year. As a matter of fact, we met when we both got a role in The Odd Couple at the Aiken Community Playhouse.
How about that?
So we got married and moved to Bloomington Normal, Illinois. He was with Owens Corning Fiberglass. They put him in charge of a plant there. So we moved to Illinois, and after 6 years then we moved to Ohio, a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, and I was there then for 32 years. Even though we divorced and I remarried, I was in Columbus for 32 years.
What did you do in Columbus there?
Oh, my resume looks like I can't hold a job. I think I've had 14 careers, but so many of them have been entrepreneurial that if I didn't like something, I just said, I'm going on to the next thing. But I started out as a teacher here in Aiken, and I taught for a while in Illinois, but I was also doing freelance writing. I wrote the annual report for the city of Bloomington for 6 years, I think, and then I became the editor, sales rep, and then editor of a suburban paper in Columbus. Let's see, after that, I started a catering business.
Really?
Yes, I started a catering business. I had that for 12 years. I was, during part of that, I was a part-time food broker, so it was a good fit. Eventually became a fundraising consultant. I was a life coach. I managed a small business expo. You name it, I think I've done it.
Which adds into the ability to be able to communicate very well, because all those things have a lot to do with communications, except for the catering, and that communicates with our
with our innermost
with
desires.
our innermost desires. Exactly. So we all enjoy food, but we also enjoy good communications and entertainment too. So you've certainly covered all the roles there. And when did you come back to Aiken?
In 2008.
Okay.
My husband, my second husband, had died in 2006, and Columbus is a wonderful place to live. I really enjoyed living there, but somehow it was just different after Ron died. And we had, a year before he died, we had bought a house here in Aiken and spent some time here, but I started spending more and more time here until finally, when I was on the phone with a girlfriend in Ohio one day, when I was here in Aiken, she said, Kathy, the difference between you in Aiken and you in Columbus and you in Aiken is night and day. You are so happy there. And I thought about that and moved. It was that simple.
And I think shortly after that, or almost simultaneously with that, I moved back to Aiken as well, and I think we saw each other at a function one night at a friend's house.
That's
so
right.
That was kind of interesting, and you know, I knew exactly who you were as soon as I saw you. So we really haven't changed much over the years.
No,
have we? And that, other than you look much younger than I do.
Oh, well, thank you for the compliment.
Well, you certainly do. You know, moving back to Aiken for you. You say that with a great deal of joy. I could see that, and you had that little extra twinkle in your eye when you made that comment. It was kind of like you had that in the back of your mind all the time, and you just needed somebody to give you that little push to come back.
Well, we had already bought the house,
Right.
and so I knew we were going to be spending more time here. But at the same time, I just thought it would be occasional.
Right.
But when I spent so much time down here alone and saw a good many of my high school friends who had either never left or had come back, I thought it has always been a wonderful town, but this could be a wonderful town for me. And so I started talking to friends, and luckily I talked to one of the right ones, who was Lee Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Lee was Lee Quinn when we were growing up, and we were close friends. And I called her when I was here, and I said, you know, I haven't seen you in years, but I would love to. And she said, let's get together for lunch. And over lunch, I said, I'm thinking of moving back to Aiken. She said, I'm going to introduce you to everybody in Aiken, and they're going to love you so that you will move here and you will be happy. And she introduced me to everybody. Between Lee and Peppy Saraski, those were the ones that took me under their wing when I first got back to Aiken. Lots of others, but they went out of their way to introduce me to a lot of people, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, and that's so funny. I did not know that piece, but you know who one of the first people I ran into when I came back to Aiken?
Probably Lee Kavanaugh.
It was Lee, and of course spent some time with Fred, and Fred was always so gracious as our mayor, and through Fred and Lee, I got involved with a number of social things in Aiken, and Fred appointed me to the Planning Commission probably a year later. And but Lee and I were always good friends. She and I grew up real close to each other, and that's another one that you'd recognize anywhere. Hasn't changed a bit. Lee's always been much like you. Is always one of the sweetest, just kind person. Always going out of their way to do things for other people, and so is Fred. So they're a great couple.
And a great match.
Yes, absolutely. But we're so happy you came back to Aiken. Now the big question that I've got is, I know your history. I know you've got printer's ink in your blood. How did you end up buying and publishing Bella magazine?
I think it came about because as part of Celebrate Aiken, which was the 175th anniversary of Aiken
Right.
in 2010, I was on the special events committee, and at some time during that year of planning, I decided that I would write a cookbook about Aiken, and a historical cookbook
Right.
about Aiken. So I applied to make it part of the official merchandise.
And you used original recipes that you dug up. Tell us how you got those.
Well, not quite.
Okay.
I would say this. Some of them I did, but what I tried to do was solicit recipes from people who live in Aiken.
Right.
And I tried first with the families that go way back, thinking they might have tried and true recipes that were sentimental to them.
Right.
But
Handed down from generation to generation.
Exactly.
Type thing. Okay.
Exactly. But I couldn't find a lot of those, and it makes sense to me that I couldn't once I started researching cooking and cookbooks through the years. There were not modern methods of cooking for a hundred and some years after Aiken was founded, and people don't want to cook over an open fire or make their own baking soda from ashes from the fireplace. I mean, what I discovered in how the early colonial women had to cook was, it will boggle your mind. So even if the recipes were modern, I tried to get a family story to connect to the recipe or to the family. And that's what made it fun and interesting and personal. So then if I felt that I wasn't getting enough response voluntarily, I just started calling my friends and badgering them. You have to send me a recipe. So after the cookbook came out, I realized that suddenly I had my 15 minutes of fame. I was the author of a cookbook, and Beth Brody Nicholson, who founded Bella Magazine in, I think it was 2004, called me and asked me to do some writing for her Bella Magazine. She and her husband had founded it, and so I did write an article, and a few months later she called me and said, "I'm thinking of selling the magazine. Are you interested?" So she sent me the financial information. I met with a couple of CPAs and said, "Is this a good deal?" And they concluded that it was. So before buying it, I worked for Beth for a couple of months just to understand the business. I feel like everything I've ever done, that resume that looks like I can't hold a job, has led to this magazine, that it's just the epitome of what I could do with all the life skills and the professional skills that I've developed through the years. So I can't say that I jumped into it and did well from the beginning, but I was willing to learn, and that internship, if you will call it, with Beth at the beginning was very, very helpful. And then I went cold turkey. And it's been a really interesting ride ever since, and I'm doing much better at running it, figuring out everything about it. At first it was, I'm surprised I didn't throw in the towel, but here I am 6 years later almost.
Your entrepreneur side won out.
That's right.
How long does it take to put together a publication?
Well, I have to start in advance, and of course now I'm just finishing up the May issue. and it will come out sometime next week. It takes at least 4 weeks to put it together. I have to sell the ads, but even before I sell the ads for the coming issue, I need to have commitments from my writers that they are writing either the assignments or something that I know that they said they would deliver to me. So there's always something ongoing, not just with this issue, but or when I say this issue, I mean the one that I'm working on.
Right.
But the next one, or even in the fall. I've already got some assignments out for fall in hopes that some of my writers will be busy over the summer. And I like to have some articles in my back pocket just in case something doesn't work. I mean, for instance, last September, I had a whole lineup of stories to run, and one by one, all my writers called me and said, I can't write this. And it wasn't because they didn't want to, but maybe the timing on the event had changed, or they couldn't get hold of someone, or that person said, this is not a good time, could we do this in another month? I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have an empty magazine. People will open it up and it'll just be blank. But luckily, my writers had other suggestions, or I'd say, can you do this story instead? And it all worked out. So I've learned to roll with it.
But having a good inventory of stories is always an important thing, I'm sure.
Yes, I don't want any holes in the magazine. Really don't like those blank spots.
There you go. As you do the magazine, you probably as a publisher and the owner, you probably wear a lot of different hats. So tell us about some of those different hats that you have to put on each week.
Well, I'm the editor, and as the editor, I assign the stories, or at least work with all the writers. We have an annual luncheon where we schedule month by month, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, as I just told you, but that's fine. We have a direction that we're heading in. I sell all the ads. I make arrangements for some of the photography. I do all the editing. I send all of the edited material and the images or the photographs to my graphic designer who lives in Florida. He used to live here in Aiken, and we used to work together the last week or so before printing. Then he moved, and we've done everything by email ever since, but we always did it by email. He sat at one end of the table with a computer, and I sat at the other end of the table with a computer, and I emailed to the other end of the table. There's no difference.
That's neat. Technology is great.
It is. It's wonderful.
It really is. I know that it's played a big part in the publishing industry for sure. Because you can see what you are going to do before you actually go to print.
Yes, absolutely. And then the other hats that I've worn, it used to be that I delivered every magazine, and we print about 4,500 copies every time. And those copies reach 8,000 to 10,000 people, because more than one person generally reads the same magazine. Probably in your household, Nancy reads it.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I look at it too, so you know.
Yeah, so there's two right there.
Exactly. And then doctors' offices, I see them in doctors' offices.
Yes, restaurants.
Yeah.
There's any number of places where people will pick it up and read it more than once. So, but besides the distribution, there's invoicing and collections, accounting, taxes. You know, there's just all of the aspects of doing a business. It is a business, although since I've remarried, Rob has taken over a great deal of the financial responsibilities, which I love. He's a godsend.
You're the creative side.
Yes, and he says, let me do that so you can do what you do best. Well, what a gift, what a gift.
Yeah, he's a very, very nice gentleman too.
Yes, he is.
Y'all are a very good pair. You certainly are a couple of, that have, created a lifestyle and worked together and doing something that you both love doing. That's great.
Absolutely, and he's another one that goes back to high school.
Yeah. It's amazing to see how things, the more they change, the more they remain the same.
That's right. That's right.
when you put the magazine together, and we talked about articles and writers, where do you get your writers from?
I've lucked into a lot of them. I met Steve Hale when we were on the steering committee for Celebrate Aiken. Anna Dangerfield had written for Beth Brody when the magazine was under her leadership,
Right.
and I called her and asked if she'd write for me. And she said, I can bring you some more writers, because she was in a writers group. And after that, she introduced me to Susan Elder, and I had known Sally Bradley from when I was teaching at Aiken High School, but I didn't realize that she was a writer. So those two came to work for me, and Steve. Phyllis McClay came on the recommendation of a friend who used to work for Easy Street. And Karen Guevara, after she retired from the site, she had done a wonderful story in the last segment of the series I did on the history of the SRS.
She did. That was very, very good. I serve on the Citizens Advisory Board for the site, and it was neat to read that and think about all the different aspects of the site out there, and that was certainly, she came from a different perspective, and I thought that was really neat.
Yes, yes. So it's been, and Tony Bauman
Yeah.
with the radio used to work for the Aiken Standard,
Yes, he
and once
did.
I found that out, I said, Tony, would you like to write occasionally for Bella? I'd love to. So I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, and forgive me if I am, but I have really, Lily McCullough Baumel, a close friend of mine from high school. She loves to write, and so I have guest writers. Barbara Smith is writing for me now from North Carolina. She is an Aikenite and also lives in North Carolina, so she's doing some writing for me. It's really interesting, but I can use some more. So if people want to write for Bella, they need to send me samples.
Good. Well, I've got one person I'll tell you about later.
Good.
I'll ask him first and then tell you, but he used to work for the Standard and is still in journalism, and I'm sure still does some writing as well. Your audience, you have to have a theme or an idea for your magazine, and one thing that one of my favorite ones that you folks have done, and it goes back for a couple of different reasons. I guess it speaks of the early days of my youth, and of my grandparents on my mother's side. Both my grandfather and grandmother worked at Aiken Prep, and Aiken Prep turned 100 years old. And you did a great magazine cover story, and on this, and a lot of information in there. And I think back to so many of the things that went on there. I remember the days of Mr. Fletcher when he first started Aiken Prep over there.
Oh, yes.
And my grandfather went over there was a girls' school here in Aiken. Did you know that?
Fermata School.
Yes, Fermata School for Girls.
Right.
And my grandfather was over there, and I can't remember how it all came about, but anyway, Mr. Fletcher got my grandfather, and he said, would you come to work for me? And he said, yes. But you know, over at Aiken Prep, the clay tennis courts over there.
Right,
Remember that?
right. I do remember.
You know who helped build those clay tennis courts?
Who?
My grandfather.
Oh,
He was
wonderful.
one of the few people that knew how to do that. So anyway, that was a long story, and I remember I was always enamored because under they had an indoor swimming pool over there.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yes.
Did it burn?
They did something, and then they ended up building something on top of it, a
Okay,
house.
okay.
Okay, so that was interesting. And then of course they had the big Olympic swimming pool out front too. So
Right, right.
And,
Well, we were members there when I was a teenager, so
Yes.
that was great fun.
yeah, but anyway, that was a great story. The audience that you have, do you have a target audience that you try to reach, or you just try to be a community magazine?
When Beth and her husband started the magazine, it started as a woman's magazine, and I think it probably very much is still considered a woman's magazine. But when I published the 4-part series on the history of the SRS in 2012, September through December, I think that was a turning point for the magazine, because all of a sudden I was getting fan mail from men. I got a lot of letters from men who said, you have done a wonderful service for this community
Right.
to go over this history and make everybody understand what we do at the site. I had a woman come up to me on the sidewalk and she said, thank you. I never knew what my husband did out there, and now I understand. I don't even know her name, but I was very happy.
Yeah.
But since then, I've had male readers, and I try to have something that's of interest to both sexes. And I guess it's my goal to become known as a general interest or a feature magazine of interest to everybody.
Well, I certainly think the reason I even asked the question was because I felt that. Because earlier when you first took it over, Nancy, of course, would have copies around the house and things like that. And she'd say, oh, here's an article, you need to read this. And I'd do that. But, you know, I'd look at some of the other articles and it was obvious that they were, you know, kind of more mainstream to your female readers. And that was a good point about the SRS articles, and I think that was when I started spending more time reading it and looking through the whole magazine. And of course, the recent one that I liked was the Aiken Prep because of the history and all the
Of
things
course.
that are going on there. So I just thought that was neat. And it looked like you were trying to embrace more of the male population into your not viewership, but readership, and that was good. I applaud you for that, and it
Thank
worked.
you.
It
Thank
worked.
you. Good.
So, and the whole concept of providing a vehicle for the community is wonderful. You know the best thing about your magazine?
What?
I mean, the articles are great and everything, but you know it's free. It's
Yes,
free.
it is. It's
doesn't-
free.
and people may not even understand that. So we wanted to make sure that they knew that it's free. And the economic side of it, of course, comes from the advertisers that you have. And I noticed that you have a very consistent advertising base in there. You have some very good advertisers. You do a good job of presenting your clients' interest in there, and you have a.
Thank you.
I would think if I had a business, I would think it would be a very worthwhile place for me to invest my advertising dollars.
Well, I appreciate that
No, I
vote
mean,
of
really,
confidence. Thank
yeah,
you.
It is very well. You do an excellent job of writing, and I don't know if you knew this, but did you know I was a former journalist?
No.
Yeah, my degree.
Do you want to write for Bella?
I might do that.
Okay.
We'll talk later. We'll
Okay.
talk offline. But no, I was one of the first editors of the school newspaper for the University of South Carolina, Aiken.
Wonderful.
And that was Ms. Law when she was there, McDonald Law's mother.
Ernestine.
Yeah, Ernestine Law. She was a good friend of my mother's, but Ernestine was a sweet, sweet lady. In fact, she was instrumental in me pursuing the journalism career. So we did that for a while and got into insurance and things like that. But just so you won't feel bad about going through so many different iterations, I don't think my father at one time said, I don't think you're going to ever settle on one profession. I said, I will, and I'll let you know when I do. So, but one thing that really stands out in your magazine, I can tell that it is a labor of love for you.
Oh, it is. It is. And as I said earlier, I think that everything I've done has led to this. I have my days. I mean, there are days when I just want to, tear my hair out and throw a Bella on the floor and stomp on it, But those moments pass because I really, what keeps me going is people that say, I loved this article. I loved the way you covered it. I love the theme of the issue, or just whatever they say, because people go out of their way to tell me how much they enjoy it. And that helps me through the bad spots.
Yeah.
I think, okay, this happens with almost every issue. I can get past this and deliver a good product and be happy about it.
Yeah.
And it's so fleeting. I don't even know why I bother to bring it up.
Well, as we close out our interview, I wanted to say one thing to you that I remember one of my journalism professors said to us as a class. He said, artists paint, newspaper, magazine, publishing, all those things. At the end of the day, they can't hold up a picture they painted, but they paint with words.
Paint with words, yes.
And he said that is even more entertaining because we get to do it over and over again.
That's right, that's right.
And when you feel good at the end of the day and you look back and you say, I created this, I did this, I embraced it, I brought in a lot of resources, and I took the talents of so many people and I put this magazine together. And when I look at Vela magazine, and I think the quality and the time that you put in it is certainly showing. And I just want to thank you for being a part of Aiken, for making this magazine and taking it and making it even better.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And going through all the organic growth that you've gone through since you've gotten it. And thank you for being an entrepreneur. And thank you for coming back to Aiken and sharing that with this wonderful community we call Aiken.
Well, I appreciate being able to talk about it. It was a big surprise to me that I became a magazine publisher, but I am delighted.
Yeah.
It's very worthwhile.
Well, Kathy, thank you for sharing your time with us today. Thank you for sharing your heart with us through your magazine. And you know, this is just one show, but you get to experience the things that Kathy is all about by picking up her magazine all over the city of Aiken. So thank you for joining us again today. And again, Kathy, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
I enjoyed it. Thank you, John.
Thank you.